Welcome to the Biotech Startups podcast by Exceeder. Join us as we speak with first-time founders, serial entrepreneurs, and experienced investors about the challenges and triumphs of running a biotech startup, from pre-seed to IPO, with your host, John Chi. In our last episode, we spoke with Doug Drysdale about his transition from BD to leading M&A at Activis, his insights on leveraging debt for acquisitions, and the importance of cultural fit in successful deals. We also touched on his strategic acquisitions at Activis, the turnaround at Norwich Pharmaceuticals and Alvogen, and his challenges and successes at Pernix Therapeutics. If you missed it, be sure to go back and give part 3 a listen. In part 4, we talk with Doug about his first-time experience running a public company, the challenges of hitting quarterly numbers, and the constant pressure of share price. We'll also hear about his move to Cybin, a startup transforming psychiatric treatments through psychedelic compounds, and discuss their rapid progress, including 2 key acquisitions, taking the company public, and their breakthrough therapies in depression and anxiety.
So this seems again like you keep putting yourself in baptism of fire moments where you're just like, turnaround and a public company for the first time. Let's do it. Let's just do it. Can you talk a little bit about, well, I guess the first question is, what was your experience running a public company for the first time?
It was not fun.
Just like your early sales, you're just like, this is not fun, but I'm going to keep doing this. Yeah.
You know what? I mean, it was fun at the beginning. So it's easy. It's easier being a public company if things are going well. I think the stock jumped 90% overnight when we announced that this new investment was coming in. I was going to take over, and then we took the stock from $2 to $13 in 10 months, something like that. So everyone was very happy. But then I learned, as a public company, we had to hit our numbers every quarter. Every quarter is a conference call. Every quarter you're getting grilled by analysts. Every Friday, IQVIA publishes prescription data on major drugs, gets fed into Bloomberg, and so all of the analysts have it. And every Friday, you can guarantee you're getting phone calls if your numbers aren't where they're expected to be. And we're talking week to week. It's just micromanaging.
Oh my God.
That's all good until things don't hit the numbers. Yep. And we ended up in, I think it was 2016. Yeah, 2016. So pre-election. Lots of pressure on drug pricing. Hillary, in particular, was putting pressure on drug pricing. There was the whole pharma bro experience, if you remember.
Oh, yeah, I do remember.
The 3,000% price increase. And so there was all this pressure on pricing for spec pharma companies like ours. We had acquired a couple of assets that were already marketed. So, of course, we had increased prices, not egregiously, but a little. But so all those pricing came under pressure, and that affected our net income. That affected our ability to service the debt that we had on the balance sheet, and it was clear to me that we needed to restructure the debt. It's not that unusual. Companies find themselves in these situations. It happens. It was kind of out of our control. The macro hitting the pricing. We just got hammered by the PBMs, honestly, on rebates and discounts. So we needed to spread the debt out over a long period of time or something like that, to manage it. But that was an area that the board and I disagreed on. And let's just say there was a board member that was also a shareholder who wasn't interested in taking any dilution. So we didn't have the same objective. My objective was make sure the company doesn't go off the rails, and then we'll focus on the share price. They weren't necessarily the same thing. We would have had to have taken a short-term hit on the share price, but it would have come back. So I just couldn't see a pathway to growing up sales organically out of that situation. And obviously with that debt pressure, we couldn't raise equity or debt either. So you had to unblock the situation. And in my view, it was restructuring the debt. So one of the directors took over as CEO, and they went on their way. And unfortunately, 3 years later, they had to file Chapter 11 and restructure. But we could have dealt with this in a very different way. It was my view. And I said earlier, I'm about fast failing. I knew what the path was. I'd been, within plenty of debt situations before in my past, and I knew how to handle and restructure and deal with those things, activists. And so that was just pointless to sort of sit in that CEO chair and just watch the share price get hammered, and the scripts not come in, and just watch it kind of fade away, which was basically what happened over the next 3 years. There was a way to fix it, and so we parted ways, unfortunately. But there you go.
And that's something, it's just like it's kind of, I mean, I'm kind of seeing a through line with these experiences. It's like you're kind of running towards the uncomfortable. Like a debt restructuring is not comfortable. Like your creditors don't want to hear that.
No, it's not comfortable, but you've got to be mature and adult in those situations. Except it is the reality.
Yeah,
and you just have to go and find a solution. It may not be the solution you like, but you got to do something.
Exactly, and I love that, because sometimes I think, it's easy to just kind of I don't want to say it's like sweep it under the rug, or just like it's a problem for tomorrow. But sometimes you just have to jump on it and get ahead of it, even though it is like you got to rip the Band-Aid off. Like, we got to do this if it means that.
It wasn't, the situation wasn't going to get any better organically. That was my point.
Exactly. So what was next after Pernix?
So I was pretty burned out, actually, after that. It was quite draining. The whole chairman CEO of a public company, a commercial company, where you're just the scrutiny all the time. It's tough. And we needed really to be stable. We needed more revenues. We probably needed more products, and a bit more runway, but so I needed a break, and decided to invest in and join a private company. So no public scrutiny.
Yeah.
A little bit of a breather and some slower speed. And so I took over and ran the small contract manufacturing business in New England, and small team, a small little facility. It just needed to do basically all the things we did at Norwich, which was improve efficiencies, improve capabilities, more than anything, bring in customers and build sales. And so that was pretty low stress in a way, in that I'd seen it and done it before. So I think we grew sales 60% first year, something like that, from a low base. We were on the Inc. 5000 fastest growing companies list that year, I think, something like that. So it was fun. It was a project more than anything else. But it was a much needed break from the public markets, put it that way.
Absolutely. And I guess my question is, I know you're now, you kind of had a moment to kind of decompress, and you're, this is getting to kind of current day Cybin. When did you know you were ready to go back into the ring of a publicly traded company?
Well, Cybin wasn't public at the time.
Got it. Okay.
Right. So Cybin was a startup, handful of folks, three founders, all from Canada, and they recruited me, and I have to say, day one, first meeting, I knew I wanted to do it just right away. I had great chemistry with the founders. We definitely had a shared vision. We were all very ambitious about what we wanted to achieve, and we knew we had to go and build the best team. So that was a good remit to go in with. These guys, all excellent serial entrepreneurs, but not a lot of pharma experience amongst them. So they were smart enough and humble enough to say, well, let's go and hire, a pharma CEO person. And we've just done so much in the last sort of 3-4 years. I joined right around the time that COVID hit. And so we have built the entire business and operations and everything entirely remotely.
Wow.
We've never had an office and never worked together, like in an office environment. And so that means we have people in Canada, all over the US, in the UK, France, Germany, Ireland. We were able to hire the talent wherever the talent was, and also build in other geographies without the expense of infrastructure, offices, and that kind of thing. I mean, along the way, we have acquired 2 companies. We acquired Adelia Therapeutics in Boston. So we set up a lab in Boston from that acquisition. They brought some early technology and IP with them. And then we acquired late last year Small Pharma. It's a company based in the UK that was doing some work that was quite adjacent to us with DMT. So we put all of that IP and science together. And of course, we took the company public. So the first job out of the gate was go raise some money. And so we went out in 2020 with really just an idea. We didn't really have a lot more than that, actually. A couple of contracts with some developers and manufacturers, but really an idea and a vision. And we raised by November 2020, we went public and raised $45 million. To date, we've raised about $300 million. And we have about 55, 60 people across all those countries, and we've now got an asset about to go into phase 3 this summer. So inception to phase 3 in 4 years is really quite amazing. That asset that we're developing for depression has breakthrough therapy designation from the FDA, which is a career first for me and for pretty much everyone in the team, as well as a rare thing. It's a once in a career opportunity. And then we have a second asset that's in phase 2 right now for anxiety disorders that will read out around year end. A huge IP portfolio, I think 50 patents or plus granted, still 170, 180 pending around the world as well, and adding to it all the time. And frankly, just amazing, outstanding phase 2 results in depression that are the biggest breakthrough in psychiatry in 40 years or something like that.
That's amazing. And for those who are not as familiar with Cybin, can you zoom out for us and tell us Cybin's mission and focus, and talk a little bit about the co-founders you ended up meeting and the team behind the technology? Yeah,
so I mean, as I said, the co-founders come from really old entrepreneurial backgrounds. They're all serial entrepreneurs that, like me, were just blown away by the opportunity here. When I first met them, I started reading about these psychedelic molecules that we're working on, the natural forms, psilocybin from mushrooms and DMT, which is in ayahuasca and others, and reading some of the academic studies that have been done around the world, quite a few of them. And honestly, at first I couldn't believe it. I thought it was too good to be true. But the more I read, the more convinced I was that these were incredibly powerful molecules. And as I said, I just had to be a part of it. I knew right away, had to be a part of it. And then they feel the same way. What was the other question you asked me?
Yeah, just like at the highest level, Cybin's mission and focus, and the kind of what got you bought in at the very beginning.
Yeah. So we look. I mean, these psychedelic compounds have been around for millennia. Right? Indigenous folks have been using them for thousands of years. We then started synthesizing them in the lab in the 30s, 40s. And we all know what happened in the 60s and 70s with them, right? So they've been around for quite a while. So we knew we had to be innovative. We knew we had to find a way to improve on the natural molecule. We wanted to not mess with the pharmacology, though. Otherwise, you're looking at potential for unwanted side effects or lack of efficacy. So the underlying pharmacology is the same, but we've optimized the pharmacokinetics, so the way that the drug gets into the site of action, in this case, the brain. So we've taken both psilocybin and DMT, and we've modified them primarily through deuteration, which is changing atoms, hydrogen atoms on the molecule for deuterium, which is heavy hydrogen. But our goal, our mission, our vision was to create these novel compounds that could radically change the landscape in psychiatry. And the way we've been treating depression for the last 40 years is with SSRI, so drugs like Prozac and Lexapro. And what they've been doing is working on the assumption that depression is caused by a deficiency in neurotransmitters. We now know that that's not the case, and that these neurotransmitter levels are likely to be a symptom, and that depression is really an issue of brain circuitry, brain connectivity. So these SSRIs have just been treating the symptoms not very effectively for quite some time. What we're seeing with our first molecule, instead of having to wait 6-8 weeks for an SSRI to work, it appears to work the next day or within a day. So after one dose, and after 2 doses that we gave in our phase 2 study, 2 doses 3 weeks apart, so not daily dosing, 75% of patients in remission after just 2 doses. And so far, they're still in remission 4.5 months later. So it's a real paradigm shift, rapid, large effects that are very durable, which is like nothing we've seen. The ability to be able to switch off someone's depression really quickly, just change the way that they think about themselves and their situation is going to be a very powerful tool. So.
That's incredible. And I guess my first question is, why? I mean, I realize that, with psychedelics, it's, you have to work with the DEA on it, but why, for, like you said, I believe you said it's like for 40 years, SSRIs were just kind of the status quo. Was it just like, was it just like we were complacent and they're like, this is the best it's going to get? Or kind of like, why was it that way? Or why has it been that way?
Yeah, well, first of all, work on psychedelics was kind of shut down by the DEA, the War on Drugs, the Nixon administration in the 70s, and it's taken a while for it to come back and reemerge. So that's the story with psychedelics, short story. With drug development and depression, we haven't really understood the underlying cause of mechanisms behind depression. So, and so we've been working on these different neurotransmitter pathways, and there have been a number of other drugs that have been approved for depression since SSRIs were first introduced, but all of them have quite small effects. And those effects are often difficult to demonstrate in clinical trials. When you have an effect size that's really small, and especially with a psychiatric condition where the placebo group is receiving a sugar pill every day, they think they're getting medication. So there's often quite a high placebo effect in these treatments, And when you have a high placebo effect and a small effect size with the active, very often in depression studies, they fail because the active doesn't separate from the placebo. And that's what we've seen largely in depression. And it's primarily because we haven't had a target mechanism to go after. And I'm not saying that we know the full mechanism of psychedelics either. We don't. But we do know that they create very large amounts of neuroplasticity, new connections and new networks being formed in the brain. And given we now think that depression is an issue of brain connectivity, then there's some logic there. Yeah, ultimately the downstream mechanisms will all be elucidated at some point. We're getting there. I mean, every week and month we see new papers come out. But just the safety profile of these things is very benign. Infrequent dosing, rapid results that are very durable. So quite exciting stuff.
Yeah. It seems like a perfect timing too, is kind of where the regulatory is becoming a little bit more amenable to it, and also our just fundamental understanding of these kind of psychiatric kind of ailments is also perfectly timed for something like Cybin. And can you talk about what your experience has been working with the FDA, particularly around psychedelics? I mean, that's a little bit, is probably a unique experience as a public company CEO.
Yeah, I would say that the FDA is granting breakthrough therapy designation to ours and to a few others as well. So they clearly see the potential here for psychedelic molecules. When we speak to them, for example, at our last end of phase 2 meeting, they seem really quite excited about it, and then they don't generally get excited about a lot of things. Yeah. And normally meetings quite dry. But I think there's quite a lot of energy and enthusiasm about the potential here because it is very different to anything else we've seen. Now, these trials come with their own challenges, as they all do. I mean, it's hard to hide the fact that someone's taking a psychedelic. It's difficult to blind it. But FDA is fully aware of that. There are many other drugs that are easily unblinded as well. Actually, only about 10% of clinical trials are really effectively blinded. Because most drugs have some kind of effect that the patient can feel. So blinding is a bit of a challenge, but it's not insurmountable. They've given pretty clear guidance on how to deal with that with trial design. We did have a setback, I think, this last week where there was an advisory committee for MDMA, and that application just wasn't up to the standard that was necessary, frankly. I think that's the politest way to put it, is that it wasn't the best job. It doesn't mean, though, that MDMA isn't a great opportunity for people with PTSD, and so hopefully they can fix that, and we'll see that come to market at some point. But no, FDA has been really quite encouraging. The breakthrough therapy designation gives us this ability to consult with them, so we're not just plonking data in front of them. We're asking them up front, hey, what do you think about this trial design, these endpoints, the sample size, and getting all those things agreed and aligned beforehand, which de-risks a lot of the phase 3 program.
Amazing. What an amazing opportunity. And you're right. It seems like once in a career for sure, especially for such an unmet need. It's, hearing that SSRIs, which are like lackluster at best, has been just like the only option, sounds pretty bad, to be quite honest. And so moving to kind of like Cybin and Cybin strategy, can you talk a little bit about your guys' intellectual property strategy? And also, I know you guys partner with a lot of organizations as well. Can you talk a little bit about those two efforts?
Yeah, so we outsource pretty much everything. So the brain trust is in-house, and then I'd say the operations are already outsourced. So everything from manufacturing, testing, clinical site recruitment, management, data analytics, regulatory consultants. We have a core team, but that team is managing external capabilities, and the reason for doing it that way is, one, we can access whole teams of regulatory staff rather than just one or two people in house. So you get more for your money that way. But also our needs have changed. Right? Our needs went from when we were preclinical to phase 3 have completely changed. So that would have meant reshaping the entire company if we did it all internally. So the outsourcing part of it is the way to go.
Makes a lot of sense. And as you are building out this kind of like core team that is like managing kind of these external parties, and you're obviously a clinical stage company, can you talk a little bit about the kind of company culture Cybin is seeking to build, and kind of how you're thinking about recruiting and kind of retaining talent?
I think I said that we have grown up entirely remotely. So culture has really been everything. And we've had to be really intentional about connectivity and bringing people together. And we do that through having a number of lighthearted gatherings that are remote, but keeping people engaged and lighthearted, because it can get a little bit working remote, right? Yeah. And then we bring people together intentionally when we have a problem to solve. Right? So we'll pick the right folks and put them in a room for a few days and solve the problem. But that's also an opportunity to socialize. And then obviously bring the follow groups together fairly frequently as well. But we've learned pretty well how to manage without an office. I'd say that our culture is one of respect, for sure. and trust that we were talking about earlier. So I think it's respect, same thing really. We have expectations of excellence, and that's also part of the trust, that everyone wants to do really well and will do the best work. So they expect the person next to them to do the best work as well. If you're not doing the best work, you're not going to cut it. Right? But that's not a sort of harsh top-down mantra. It's just that the team's going to self-select you in or out. We're definitely results-oriented. Right? But, our people are our most important asset. We're a knowledge-based company. So it's all about maintaining that culture. We're very sensitive to it. We're always keeping checks on it. We're a mental health company as well, so we're all conscious about our employees' mental health. So we give people plenty of time off. We encourage people to take downtime. We mandate it, actually. And I think that sort of level of respect just permeates across the organization. And when you grow from zero, I've learned now that it's a lot easier to create a startup than it is to do a turnaround. Turnarounds come with all kinds of cultural issues that you inherit.
Yep.
And that's not easy sometimes. But as a startup, we've self-selected the team, and the team has selected the team. Somebody a long time ago, a very smart person, said to me that in a startup, the future of our company is in the hands of people we haven't met yet. Right, so
spot on.
Yeah, you get the culture right, but then you've also got to get the systems right so that ongoing recruitment sticks to the cultural guidelines, right, and the cultural sensitivities. Because if you start to dilute that, then you lost what you had to start with.
Absolutely. And I think so Exceeder is also a remote first company. And I think the communication and trust is like, you got to be super intentional, especially being a remote first company. But we then also, just like you guys, supplement it with these in-person gatherings, which you just can't replicate. So I love the kind of the ability to balance both being remote, but also, in person and with intentionally for specific moments. But this is really, really exciting. And I love hearing kind of where you got, it sounds like you guys found progress very, very fast. And it's, I'm excited to kind of watch and be an observer from the outside. And as you're looking forward, 1, maybe 2 years, what's in store for Cybin?
Yeah, now I think it's all about execution. So we've had a lot of unknowns in the beginning when you've got early science. You really don't know where things are how they're going to translate and work. But now we're in late clinical phases, so it's really about execution. So we're going from a fairly small phase 2 program to a phase 3 program that has 550 patients in it, probably 60 plus sites across 7 or 8 countries. So scaling for that execution is our biggest focus at the moment. And then we're looking at creative ways to continue to add to the balance sheet so that we can add new indications and add more value to the pipeline as we go. So phase 3 kicks off this summer, and then our phase 2 program for GAD reads out at the end of the year. So we have a couple of big catalysts coming up.
Amazing. That's super exciting. Well, Doug, thank you for so much for your time here. And in traditional Biotech Stars podcast fashion, we have 2 traditional closing questions. First, would you like to give any shout outs to anyone who's supported you throughout your career?
Oh, absolutely. My wife. Absolutely. I mean, of all the time I'm like tied up with work or traveling or whatever, couldn't do it without her. So I owe her everything, really. So for putting up with that, for sure. Yeah.
Likewise. Likewise. And sometimes she's like, I need you to stop talking about Exceeder. I'm like, okay, fair enough. I'll give you that. I'll give you the room. That's totally okay. And the second question is, if you can give any advice to your 21-year-old self, what would it be?
That you don't have to have it all figured out. That it's not going to be a straight line. I've seen plenty of successes where it was a very long, winding road to get from point A to point B, where the goal was, and we did it, but not necessarily the way we thought we were going to do it. So I think just pursue what you enjoy doing and don't worry about having it all figured out.
Absolutely. And I that's probably the advice that I needed as well when I was 21. there's certainly a lot of like at that age, existential dread. You're just like, what am I going to do? And hearing that, and hopefully anyone out there listening can impart that advice in their career. So Doug, thank you so much for your time. You've been so generous, and I'm very excited to see the kind of the next phase this summer for your phase 3s. But yeah, thank you again.
Thank you, John. It was great chatting with you. Thanks very much.
Yeah, likewise.
That's all for this episode of the Biotech Startups podcast. We hope you enjoyed our 4-part series with Doug Drysdale. Be sure to join us for our next series with Derek Henneke, a biotech entrepreneur and board member with over 30 years of experience in the CDMO industry, whose mission is to support the biotech revolution and create value for patients, customers, and investors. In addition to his experience as an investor and board member for multiple biotechs, Derek was the founder and CEO of Excellience, a Florida-based contract development and manufacturing company that specialized in developing clinical phase 1 through 3 drug products, which eventually sold to Capsulgen Lonza in 2016. His extensive experience in pharma and cell therapy manufacturing makes for an insightful conversation that founders can learn from. The Biotech Startups podcast is produced by Exceeder. Don't want to miss an episode? Search for the Biotech Startups podcast wherever you get your podcasts and click subscribe. Exceeder provides research labs with equipment leases on founder-friendly terms to support paths to exceptional outcomes. To learn more, visit our website www.exceeder.com. On behalf of the team here at Exceeder, thanks for listening. The Biotech Startups podcast provides general insights into the life science sector through the experiences of its guests. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from the podcast is at the user's own risk. The views expressed by the participants are their own and are not the views of Exceeder or sponsors. No reference to any product, service, or company in the podcast is an endorsement by Exceeder or its guests.